Hello, welcome Whale family to another episode of Makersplace by Whale. We have a very special guest tonight, Rowan E Cassidy. He's an extremely talented conceptual and 3D artist who's collaborated with musical acts like Behemoth, and he's worked on films like Aquaman, X-Men Origins, Wolverine, and more. And tonight we're going to be talking about his latest collection inspired by his experience during the pandemic called Mood Variants. Welcome, Rowan. Thank you for being here
Hey,
today.
yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah,
So you've been a concept artist and done storyboard and design work for feature films. As I mentioned before, Aquaman, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead
yeah,
Men Tell No Lies. So many to mention. I shared the IMDb link in stream text so people can take a look. But can you talk about your own origin story and how you eventually created opportunities like this in your creative career?
opportunities like um, working in the film industry or NFTs
Yeah.
or what kind of
Both.
yeah.
Yeah. How did this all come
Well,
together? Yeah.
well, I've always loved stories, and so film has always been one of those sort of like an apex kind of art form, where everything comes together, the movement and sound and writing and performance and visuals. Um, so I was practicing fine artist prior to entering, um, the film industry. So I was, painting and drawing, but I'd always loved, narrative painting and you know, the classical drawing. And so when I was, um, it's a while ago now, but also graphic novel. So sequential art was something that I'd always, been drawn to. And when when the film industry sort of kicked off in Australia, they opened Fox Studios, and now I can remember they were making a little movie called The Matrix, and I'd heard about that through I don't know how I heard about it, but someone through art school had a connection there, and it just ticked over in my head. And I was having exhibitions, and as a young guy, I went down to Sydney where I knew these studios were, and I literally walked into one of these post houses, a place called Animal Logic. Um, they went on to do a lot of animation, like the Lego Movie. That's Animal Logic. Um,
Oh yeah, that's a
anyway,
great
I
studio.
got in touch with them and I sent them some of my work, and I basically just sort of kicked the door in. I went and I just wouldn't take no for an answer. I really wanted to um, I really thought of it like in classical terms, like as though it was an apprenticeship. That I knew that there were incredibly talented people that were working in that industry, and there was huge kind of resources and craft skills and technology and art departments, and I was really looking for my people. I wanted to be a part of
Yeah.
something, and so I started in post. Because that was, I suppose, what was most readily kind of available. Even then, it was hard. It was hard though. I was learning on the job, and um, that was, drawing storyboards and designing for, um, visual effects, and really learning about it all through coming up through the sort of the hard yards of, um, advertising and just, working 24-hour shifts, learning on the
Yeah.
job, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
I know that
that was sort
life.
of yeah. So that's how I came in. That was, and I was just 100%. driven to pursue the craft of filmmaking. And so it was really just incredibly exciting time. And I think it was the strength of my drawing, really, and my sort of sense of the cinematic that got me in there. I can see you're sort of scrolling through all this stuff. It's very true. Like you can see, I've sort of come full circle back to real classical drawing and traditional sort of techniques and processes. But so yeah, underneath all of that, high end cinematography is a lot of just like solid drawing and a real kind of respect for the the artist apprentice relationship. So I was able to kind of really suck as much as I could out of all of that. And as much of a challenge as it was early on, I developed a very kind of broad skill set that's allowed me to really be able to kind of express any idea I want visually, using all these tools, not just drawing and painting, but being able to use really technical 3D and understand lensing and cameras and sequential art. So yeah, I don't know if that's kind of what you're wanting to know more about, but that led me into, I was working with a guy called Baz Luhrmann, and Baz.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Baz had made a film called Moulin Rouge, and he was wanting to kind of pursue a different direction. He'd been doing strictly these big musicals. I can remember I had 2 interviews. One was with George Miller. He was producing what was going to be Fury Road, Mad Max, and the other interview I had was with Baz, to go and talk to Baz. And
that's so cool.
I'd always loved Mad Max. Mad Max was what I'd grown up with. The Road Warrior was this huge part of my sort of psyche. So I was thrilled to go and meet with George, but I ended up going with Baz, which was this completely sort of lateral thing for me, because it was like musicals, making the Red Velvet. But him and Catherine Mudd, she'd won, his wife, she's his production designer, she'd won 5 Academy Awards. And so I really wanted to have access to the insights of the process of really crafting production design. And I had that opportunity with Baz and Catherine. And so I spent quite a few years with them. I learned a lot, and I had some amazing experiences, and I met incredible people. Like I had the opportunity to meet Dino De Laurentiis, and
wow.
Dino was like the last true movie mogul. From he had been Fellini's producer, and then he'd created, De Laurentiis pictures like Conan the Barbarian and Blue Velvet and these classic legendary, like Flash Gordon, Raw Deal, all these amazing films from the 80s that were really formative for me. I had exposure to. I met Dino, and because I was working with Baz, and I was working on a project which he was developing, which was an Alexander the Great epic, and they wanted to see. They said to me, "We want to see a beautiful war,"
and we think you're the guy
to
to help
make a
create,
beautiful war.
to help you create that. And I was like, yeah, I know
what you mean. Yeah.
I can help you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was doing these huge kind of paintings and working on storyboards, and then I was doing other things. Like I worked on films like Narnia, and I traveled around. But I ended up. This is a weird long story, but I was working with Baz on a particular project, and at the time I was writing as well, and I submitted a manuscript to a literary prize, and I won this literary prize called the Varuna, and I ended up I was good friends with Baz's producer, a guy called G. Mac Brown, who was also a big kind of top 10 Hollywood producer. And it was a strange time, but I'd written this manuscript and it won this prize, and I showed it to Mac, and I ended up in Hollywood with a film deal, living in the Hollywood Hills in Hollywood land with this producer and his family, and that's just when it just got trippier and trippier. I ended up kind of flying around in helicopters, and it was great.
Cool.
I got to meet these figures within film who'd worked on creating movies that I'd grown up with. Like I can remember I flew with the guy that had flown all the helicopters in all of the great 80s films like Lethal Weapon, and he'd managed and flown the choppers in Predator, and I can remember talking to him all about that. I love that film. And there's another guy, Don McAlpine, a great cinematographer, like he'd shot films like Breaker Morant, and again another classic sort of Australian film that I'd grown up with. But he shot Predator, so he told me all about working in Mexico and what was like on the shoot, working with those guys. It's legendary kind of action heroes. So yeah, I mean, I've got dozens of stories like that. I ended up in Vegas on this shoot for the Coppolas. Sofia Coppola was making a film out there, and and so I met the Coppolas. I met Francis and we're having lunch, and
that's wild.
I was sitting there going like, this guy's he's kind of, he made Apocalypse Now. He's a part of my psyche.
Like psyche,
kind of,
yeah.
I'm sitting here kind of talking to this artist who's been this part of this formative kind of stuff of my psyche. So I was able to actually meet these creators and artists and get a sense of how they relate and the language that they're kind of speaking, and how they do what they do. And I was always observing their process, and I suppose wanting the affirmation of that comparison, being able to kind of gauge, okay, so that's how it's done, that's how they did it. You put it up on the wall, you put them down on the floor, like you spread them out, and we all come in and we look and we talk, and okay, right, that was there was a lot of liberating kind of stuff around process, and I think, as a visual artist and a storyteller, and that was incredibly powerful and useful for me. Really in those insights are great, I suppose, for a young artist who's wanting to understand how to do it. So I was very lucky to have those
those insights. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to work with and learn from the greats in your experience. And actually, we have, it's a two-pronged question. I was curious who were some of your longtime mentors when you started out, and also Mongoose MR in our Discord is asking, does Rowan currently serve as a mentor or master to anyone?
Possibly. Yeah, I'm very, like, I've got a lot of respect, like I said, for the master apprentice relationship, which is it's very special. You know, it's a deep thing, and I that there's a level of communication that you can kind of do with the visual arts that's, you know, it's beyond language, but it's incredibly important to be able to be articulate and to share as well. And yeah, coming in, I mean, I've had probably a skill of mine, a life skill, was finding and identifying mentors at different points along my journey. It's something that I think I was good at, being able to identify the right person at the right time who was going to that I could trust, that I could identify as being no bullshit, you know, someone that was really going to provide me with a kind of and I'm not saying they were necessarily warm and fuzzy. I mean,
Right.
some of the guys that I've, you know, been lucky enough to kind of learn from have been, you know, strong figures.
Maybe difficult to work with.
There's a guy, creative director at Animal Logic, Bruce Carter. He gave me my break coming in, and you know, I still chat with Bruce. He's a wonderful, gentle, you know, he's a good guy. You know, geez, before then, there was an art store that I visited. This was in far north Queensland, like right up the top end, and I was learning watercolors, and I could identify that the guy who ran the store knew what he was talking about with watercolors, which are it's a really tricky medium. And I can remember he was mentioning something about stretching paper, and I was like, oh, what? Tell me about that. You know, he was really open about sharing all this craft. And John Kibbe, and he passed away. He was a beautiful guy who showed me a lot. And then Baz Luhrmann was definitely a formative kind of mentor who showed me a lot. He kind of identified that I was at a certain point where I was open to learning, and so, you know, that was pretty special. And then, like I said, G Mac Brown, he was good. That was more film production and understanding the bigger picture of things. You know, that was a bit further down the track. But I'm always open, you know, to anybody who's got the kind of humility and the genuine sort of I don't know, stuff to want to learn, or be curious enough and outgoing enough to ask. You know, I'm always I think being generous about sharing those sorts of, you know, skills is, or understanding encouragement as well. It's encouragement so important for us. It's such a powerful thing when someone can encourage your work and what you're doing, because it's such a it's a challenging thing to do, to put yourself out there. And the visual arts are punishing. You know, they really show you.
Yes.
You know, if you have an intent, and you're you're putting it down, and you know what you put down doesn't align with that intent, it's gonna punish you. And
Yeah.
so
you're gonna punish you. That's what happens.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so being able to kind of navigate that and handle that is a particular kind of test of character, I suppose, which means that you've got to you're putting yourself on the line. And so being able to have some guidance and encouragement around that I think is an essential part of any young artists, any artists, you know, progress and journey and all that.
Yeah, like we were talking before we went live about the importance of the our artists, like an apprenticeship and teacher relationship, apprenticeship mentor relationship. You know, I think that's so important in helping navigate the self-doubt, or, you know, just all the challenges that come up in the creative process. It's good to see somebody who you admire their work, and then also see behind the scenes that, you know, it's also that they've got their challenges, and you learn the tools that they've used to get past that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, like I was saying before, that having a reference point, because I mean, there's so much. I mean, comparisons aren't necessarily helpful,
right.
But especially now with the kind of volume of social media, with you know, we're constantly blitzed with mastery and incredible work from all through history, and intensely vivid, striking works that are just like dime a dozen, and so there's this the toxic comparison has always been there. I mean, when you see something great and you kind of you can cringe, but
you're like, this is amazing, but also why can't I do this also? And how did they do it?
And I'm so small. So I mean, when I was coming up, I wasn't exposed to that level of kind of bombardment, visual kind of bombardment, but I was still very aware to kind of quarantine myself from those potential comparisons. You know, there were times where I would you know, I'd purposefully isolate myself from media, and you know, I wouldn't look at books. You know, I would stay away to protect myself, my confidence. You know, my own kind of understanding that is important too. You know, knowing when to protect yourself from those sorts of from that blitz. It's definitely a thing.
There's definitely a fine line between like the inspiration of looking at other people's work and comparison.
I mean, going to the movies, just being exposed to you know, the power of that stuff is, you know, it's important to know, you know, how to guard against what's going to work for you and where you're at in your process. Sometimes you need to fill up, you know, and other times you need to cocoon yourself, and understanding yourself, you know, knowing yourself enough to be able to handle that is important, certainly.
Knowing yourself enough to know when you have to cocoon or not.
That's it.
Feat in itself.
Know thyself.
I really wanted to talk about this collection. This was your first drop on Makersplace, but you did a collaboration with heavy metal act Behemoth called the Seven Seals, and I was really curious what the inspiration was, like what was it like to work with the band, and Like I'm really curious which elements came first. Like, was it the music, the writing, or the visuals? Because there's some really cool descriptions on these pieces, and I'm gonna drop the links in. Ooh, sorry.
Ooh.
I just blasted me really loud. I hope it didn't do
Yeah.
that for anyone else.
Yeah, watch the volume of it.
Yeah, I'm going to share it in chat because it's like super intense and it'll like overtake the conversation. But the music is really intense along with the art, and it's really beautiful too. Like when you said that they hired you to do a beautiful war, I was like, yeah, totally, this guy would do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, war is an extreme, you know, and it's in those extremes of humanity that you get the, you know, the essence of, and the drama, you know, the intensity and the humanity is fascinating. But yeah, the seals, inspiration, they were celebrating the 7th anniversary of their album, the Satanist, and so it was fitting to choose the 7 seals, you know, 7th anniversary, and I just went straight to the King James Bible, which is this, you know, the kind of the great, the poetry in that is always incredibly moving and you know, beautiful, and that's probably the inspiration, apart from Albrecht Dürer's classics, you know, the Four Horsemen and those etchings. Working with the band, the music, you know, I listened to the album. I listened to the album a lot, and really, I kind of just, I just drove it. Really, I I was into, you know, creating something that was going to really um, distill the kind of, what was it that we said last time I talked about this? It was the the existential horrors, you know, are what 7 seals are about, and 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 this kind of will lead into the mood variants, which are kind of, you know, they're radically different aesthetically, but they're thematically they're on the same kind of line, and so the seals are all about, you know, the end of days. It's the great kind of horror of the the end of the earth, you know, pestilence and comets falling, and you know, the destruction of the environment. That's that work there. People often ask me about that one. I mean, I as intuitive as the process is, there's still a great deal of sort of, I suppose, intellectualizing because I love symbolic painting. I love symbolism, um, and this was the lamb with the raven, and the I suppose there I was thinking about, um, you know, the the eyes being, you know, the the portal to the soul, and the lamb of this is the Lamb of God. I mean, I guess to spell it out, I'm really saying something like, um, what stands for the church today is sort of really spiritually empty to me and a lot of people, you know, and I'm sort of representing that there in a kind of sort of brutal way.
Yeah.
You know, we have the burning of the witch above.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, each of them are kind of loaded with their own,
Like
um,
story.
yeah, and a I hope a fearful kind of piercing sort of dark energy, because I think that's what the seals are really all about. Closing in on that, the humanity of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of the existential nature of those fears, the horror of the end.
Yeah, and at the same time, these images are just really beautiful and brutal, but they're still quite mesmerizing. So I don't know what that says about
well, I think
the horrors of things, but yeah.
There's a kind of there's always a
duality.
A balance between this subject and there's the content and the meaning. So you have I wanted to do something that was an homage to the classical, but that was also contrasted with the technical, the 3D and the NFT meeting with a copperplate etching, traditional copperplate etching. That's the contrast there. But back to the just the visual appeal. One of the things I love about the alchemical masters and the guys like Robert Flood and then William Blake, and their work is intensely designed. There's a great deal of graphic design in their works. This one's more of a kind of a Tiepolo, but yeah, the appeal. There's layers of aesthetic kind of stuff that goes on when you're constructing these things. There is this intuitive response, but then there's also how is my eye working its way through this image, and how am I constructing the depth, and where is the focus, and what's the highest point of contrast, and how can I create something that has solidity and but remains open. Where are the escape routes? How does this thing breathe visually? How can I build a story and drive it visually with force? And so there are sort of seemingly banal kind of levels to the construction. There's making pictures, and composition is really important when you're looking at classical art, especially. So these most of my works, especially the body of work that is on Instagram, that you can see on Instagram, is I'm very conscious of things working at range. So these will read, and they will have power on a wall 20 feet away, or if you blew them up at 200 feet away. They'll also work if they're a postage stamp. So there's a
you're really thinking like a designer.
They're graphically designed, and that's what all those masters are working in that way. They're of course there's an intuitive response, and the force of that is what's behind the sort of strange, unconscious, symbolic kind of power. But there's also simply like how to make these things, and then and when they come to the 3D, which is very simple here, deceptively simple here. Again, it's taking something that's really flat and looking into it and thinking about where the focus is, and what you know, how how do I want to drive the meaning will always be at the heart of the decisions that get made. And there's just plenty that you know, that's the decision making process is the thing. I mean, I suppose you could say that you know, people have talent and they develop their talent and they have great, you know, they have great skill and craft and all of that, but understanding the decisions and the choices is kind of where you end up. How you how and why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Especially with your experience doing storyboarding. I mean, that takes it back to like, does this translate as like a postage stamp or something that is on like a 20-foot wall? Like, can you translate this emotion or this thought, large or small? I think that's why storyboards exist, so that, you know, you're thinking about it at that level, and how do you make it work?
Also how driving the emotional impact. You know, understanding the kind of the vocabulary of that, you know, of how to kind of construct images in order to drive the effects of whether something's reading from left to right, and whether it's you know, whether something is running against your eye. As you know, we're all trained in the West to read from left to right, but when you're constructing images, you know, understanding how the viewer responds is so important. And so there's a whole, the grammar and the vocabulary and the shorthand and all of that around image making is something that I've always been fascinated to unlock. And the dark arts, the secrets of all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is a less dark arts question, but related to just technicalities. Like, Justin would like to know the process that you went through making the seals, because it's 3D, but it also looks hand drawn, and he said it reminds him of tilt brush creations.
Of which creation?
I don't know if Tilt Brush. Have you ever used that? It's like a VR painting app.
Oh yeah, no, Tilt Brush. I know Tilt Brush. No, VR painting. So I think you've got to
That's
be
wild. Thinking in 360 degrees, I can't even.
Yeah, and not throwing up while you're doing it. I mean, I've had a go, but it's the kind of thing, like, it's not quite.
It's overwhelming.
Or you've got to be born into it. Like, maybe if you were a kid and that's where you grew up through that. I mean, each one of these forms has got its own, very specific process that's going to, govern, the outcome. These, I drew them in ink mostly. It's a lot of drawing, like a lot. I draw a lot, and I paint a lot. So a lot of preparatory work, and then I went into the studio and I made copperplate etchings. So I redrew them, and they're like, these are huge sheets of copper that and with acid baths, and that's its own. On my Instagram, you can see there's a highlight reel called Intaglio, and you can see under the intaglio at the top, under the highlights, you'll see, there are some of the plates. Yeah, there should be an intaglio highlight, and within that you'll see a lot of the the making of, you'll see a lot of stuff in there around.
I love these old printmaking techniques. Just
acid and cutting steel. It's really what I love about that process and the form and the content there is not just the tradition of the history. It's the actual the 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 metallurgy. Like it's alchemy, it's
Alchemy.
chemistry,
Yeah.
and it's rolled steel, and
Mhm.
that's incredibly toxic what he's doing there, right?
Yeah.
That's insane. That should not be done.
No.
That's, you breathe that in, you're kind of dead. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
not good for your
acid.
lungs. Yeah.
All this stuff is it has this real kind of heavy masculine kind of quality to it, which I love. And it's a fit with the whole aesthetic of the extreme kind of
Absolutely.
metal.
Yes.
So and it's so tangible. One of the beautiful things about this particular type of printmaking is it's a relief print. So everything's debossed and it
Yeah.
punches up out of the paper, so you can touch them, and that they're dimensional. They
Yeah, it's
actually
tactile.
sit out from the paper, and it's a fascinating process, and incredibly involved.
Yes.
Takes a long time to get them right, and I'm lucky enough to know the studios here, and master printmaker, the Debbie Ferdinando, and the Black Hand gang here
That's cool.
in Ubud. That amazing.
Wow.
So I
It's
love
mesmerizing to watch too.
Yeah, so that there's a bit of process there. You can spend some time looking at
Yeah.
so much black ink.
And then just conversely, what you've done with your most recent drop with mood variants, just aesthetically, is very different, but it still has this same energy of the work that you've done with Behemoth, that it's mesmerizing and beautiful, but also has this very, this message behind it about just this existential sort of doom that's looming over us. And I was curious why emojis were your vehicle for this series, and what was the inspiration behind all of this?
Well, the inspiration's got to be, to begin with, COVID, the lockdown, and I suppose looking at the line through from the Seven Seals, it's the end of days and the pestilence and the sort of, the like you say, the doom, the sense of the kind of, but then also the neuroses, we're looking at emojis that are, I suppose, like I say in the text, they're subverting the kind of the standard non-threatening kind of fun version. This is sort of my alternative emojis that are really kind of expressing that all of the sort of the turbulence and the vortex of high emotion that everybody's in. That it's as though we're just COVID has rammed everybody's face up into this mirror of
Yes.
mortality, where we're forced to sit at home and look at death counts and reflect on the meaning of it all. And I think there's at the same time being exposed to so much social media and the effects that COVID sort of amplified, this edging everybody into this heightened emotional states where there's just this outrage. And the mechanics of marketing and the mechanics are, the psychology behind edging and nudging and pushing people into heightened reactions and edging people into outrage, and it that drives engagement. Those responses drive engagement, and so there's a mechanic, at work behind what we're constantly being exposed to, the news cycles and everything. So, but what it's done is it's just created this kind of realm of paranoia and neurotic kind of dread and over emotional kind of responses.
Yes.
And so to begin with, it was COVID, and I suppose the idea of that this invisible air is now a threat, and it's something that can destroy nation states. It's kind of holding us all hostage. The psyche is held hostage by the breath, and so I was wanting to express all of these things, the kind of the toxicity and the weirdness of that existential kind of dread being, but also in a way that was subverting the kind of that superficial thing of the language of emojis, which is this truncated sort of
expression,
form of communication, which is so sort of superficial and glib. And I sort of thought, well, this is my sort of fuck you to all of that. But I mean, as much as it's about COVID, I think now looking, it's much more than that. Like I'm saying, it's really about this vortex of strange reaction that we're in now. It's like yes, there's the epidemic, but I think we've gone beyond that now into a sort of a new world of chaotic selves, and these are a reflection of that. I suppose like a weird sort of Black Mirror.
Yes, I did get that vibe, and
so as well, you, because you're mentioning the seals, and we're talking about like the layers of meaning, and also that banal aspect of the construction.
Yeah.
So I was wanting to do something different that would maybe I don't know, sort of subvert my own little following. Kind of often want to sort of box me into some kind of like pure black metal guy or something.
The pressure to just have one style as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, I'm much more than that. But I mean, the emoji is a fascinating, symbolic language, and the identification is something that's, it's a really interesting thing. Just viewer response and identification, and the smiley, is like the ultimate kind of tool of identification. So I wanted to pull it back to the absolute sort of absolute basics of a message, just with the simplest kind of and also the crudest hand drawing that I could do, and from there I wanted to combine that with that hyper complexity and the illusion of like these gaseous fluid simulations, which I love. The controlling the magic of the mists and these fumes. It's like looking at a fire, that hypnotic that hypnotic thing of staring into a fire, or any kind of anything like that. It just it draws you in. So combining that sort of the hypnosis of those fluids with something as powerful as the symbol, that identification of the emoji, that's where I was building up from, kind of thinking how to create something that's visually in like intensely engaging, but and deceptively simple, and delightful still, to have a kind of a weird charm. as creepy, as sort of creepy as they are, they still sort of,
they're charming for sure.
They still have a charm to them, which is which is,
and then they like become sinister once the smoke begins.
Right.
That's what happens for me.
And each of them have their own sort of, it's amazing how expressive the gases are, to drive and match a sort of a feeling with a face. So I think there's a pink one with the pink mood with the sad pink.
This one,
lockdown.
Yeah, that one really feels, just the direction of the smoke is just, it's like almost melting. Yeah.
So they have their own strange charm, and each of them are I just look at them like,
I've not dabbled in 3D myself, but I feel like it's like magic, and I wouldn't have known that this was like generated if I hadn't seen your Instagram that was talking about your process, because it looked to me like at some point you had lit something on fire and then like filmed it and then did some other stuff later. But it's curious how
that's the thing about illusion. And I mean, if you're into traditional classical drawing, and I mean, it's you're inevitably getting into illusions of form and light, and they're fascinating illusions. So this is like, these are gaseous fluid simulations that are probably more advanced 3D, and this is the kind of thing that I learned, working in film production, coming up through not just blocking out shots and in previs, but also really getting into visual effects and seamless illusions, and these are made with fume, using voxel grids and wavelet turbulence, and resimulations, and using different velocity channels to mask out the drawings that I've imported. So you're layering many levels of reference learning to come to a point where you can kind of drive a that kind of technical 3D at an intent, and get a result. There's certainly happy accidents along the way. That's, I suppose, with 3D, that was always my goal with 3D, was to get to a place where I was that familiar that I could generate happy accident, that I could generate enough chaos in an accident and still be able to, what's the word, to capitalize on an accident. I mean, that's another skill, as a visual artist or any kind of creative person, is identifying when something, being able to capitalize is a skill. So there's to get to a point in 3D where you can throw it around, and you're familiar enough that then you can catch an accident and allow it to do its thing. That's I suppose that's a level of mastery and fluency in using a tool. So yeah, there's a bit of that in these, allowing, because I mean, so much chaos when you're using those systems. It's actually, I mean, it's incredible, because you start to really kind of think about the meaning of it all. You're looking at it and going like, how on earth, like some genius, actually defined how these voxel systems, and you look at, say, Leonardo in his sketchbook, and he's studying water and looking at how there's a Leonardo quote which I love, which is flame moves in air as air moves in water. And that's like a classic Leonardo kind of
insight,
comment by him. But it's like, you look at bubbles underwater, that they're moving with the same fluidity as flames will. And I love atmospheres, and I love light, and I love I love gaseous fluid simulations.
It's just fun to draw and make things that look mesmerizing too.
Yeah. And to imbue those things with layers of meaning. That tell stories and create something that might connect or move people is so wonderful.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear the depth of stories that you had, layers and layers of meaning that you had in this, because I had my own ideas, and even just on the surface was like, oh, this is like the way that we're having to move through life and like put on a happy face, but like we're actually like dying inside, like having an existential crisis.
These are the alternative. You should, I should turn this into a library of emojis that you could, put on your phone.
Absolutely. I would 100% use these.
They might find a home.
They definitely convey real emotion. All the layers. All the layers that an emoji can't.
Yeah.
Justin said a library package of real feels.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Real feels. That's good. Good name.
That's the idea. So subversion. I mean, and this feeds into the crypto conversation and looking at NFTs and the idea of, I mean, what I love about NFTs is two things. And in this context, it's the subversion. Like we're just talking about an alternative to the kind of the mouthwashed emoji, the bleached out, non-threatening, kind of fun, truncated sort of little symbol, versus these, which are a subversion of that, and that's really what crypto and NFTs are really all about for me. In one sense, is that undermining of those structures, of those traditional institutional structures, and particularly the art industry and the gatekeeping around that, and the elitism and the all of
like the pay to play kind of stuff.
And also the market that the money behind the fine arts, and really that all being driven by a system of resale, and where to park value in hard assets, and essentially investing, and that being something that's really what that world is all about. I mean, that's all been totally exposed by the kind of hyperdrive of NFTs, and looking at how social prestige and value is attributed is fascinating. But crypto and NFT subverting all of those institutions, and then there being this big movement of, I think, really millennial people who are locked out of that kind of prosperity, just taking a stand. And actually, I think that's really what's behind it's the militancy and the subversion and the retaliation that I feel. I mean, there's people talk about nihilistic memes, like, you know, look at Doge and those things that are like a fuck you to, and, you know, Wall Street bets, and that there's a real reaction against that legacy system, which is locked so many out. I see that. I see the movement, the community that's behind NFT, although it's sort of veiled with that nihilism or a sort of goofiness. What it's doing is that's really masking a deep kind of militant, kind of like it's kind of like a true age of Aquarius thing, like a real change, like a real. I mean, 50 years ago, you had people who, you know, boomers who thought things were going to change, and then, you know, they didn't. And I suppose the promise of capitalism is, you know, it's been shown as a lie, and then you have this kind of world that's opened up with new technology and democratization of things like of money and decentralization, like the moving into another. It's like there is a divide, and I can see that divide is growing, and on one side of it are young people. Yeah, like by the nature of the technology locks out old people, because by its very nature, it's so new and young. You kind of have to be versed in a certain level of tech to be able to swim in those waters. So I love it. I just love the subversion. So that's one side of my take on NFT, and what I love about NFTs and the technology and the kind of the political kind of ideological stuff that's there, even though it's kind of hiding. I mean, I talked about this with Aisha last time. It was the idea. I don't think it's talked about enough. The idea with NFTs and ownership, and the incredible thing about NFTs is verified ownership of a digital asset. The idea that there is a direct relationship between the creator and the owner, and that will be forever, and it's verifiable, and that relationship. I think, you know, you have a spectrum of like participants in NFT and art, and you have you have investors, and then you have people who are trading and flipping, and then you have collectors who love
actually love art.
Well, there's collectors who may just love to collect, who are who delight in having amassed and hoarding collections of baseball cards. That's incredibly fun and gratifying and everything. And then there are the sort of connoisseurs and people who are looking for genuine meaning and they have a love of art itself. So there's a spectrum there. They're all valid, but what links, you know, a collector or any of those people to the creator, I think, is the real power and the real meaning behind what makes NFTs special. I mean, if you think of, you know, in 1,000 years from now, and you have a blockchain, and on it you've got a list of ownership that you could join. You know, maybe say Michael Jordan owned this thing or minted it, you know, and your great grandfather's on the list. There's a connection there that hasn't existed before with. I mean, it has in a very muted kind of a sense. Now there's this direct interface with the creator and the owner, which I think is special and
Yeah.
and has a kind of a spiritual layer to it that I don't know. Maybe people like are unconsciously aware of that, or they intuitively kind of get a sense of that. Um, and I certainly feel that in the communities that, you know, the discords and the like the whale community, and there's a real sense of a love of being able to connect with the artists, and
Yes.
also being able to kind of wear that with a sense of pride, and I think that's really special. You know?
Yeah.
I don't think it's trivial. You know.
No.
And
I've sorry, go on.
yeah. Well, those are the two things. I think it's the subversion, and then it's also the nature of this new technology that allows for this linking of people together in a particular way that forms a special relationship with the artist, the art, and the owner, and yeah. So
Yeah. I was really resonating with what you said about there being like an innate spiritual connection between the collector and the artist, and also it's that, you know, if the collector wants to, you know, hold something in their wallet and pass it down to their kin, or if their kin were to sell it down the line, like the artist benefits from that too, or the artist's descendants benefit from that too, and it's such a cool thing that it keeps going. And that never happened in traditional art. All that money that's in traditional art only went to collectors, and now all that money is going to the rightfully to the creators. And if the collector makes money on it, then the artist also wins too. So it's really so cool.
Yeah, there's a I think that's it's about value again.
Mm-hmm.
It's brought that meaning of value forward, like and it pushes people to consider what your core beliefs and values.
Yeah.
10% goes back to the artist. I mean, that's an amazing development, and what an incredible progression that's allowed by that technology. So, and again, that I think when you look at COVID and lockdown, and the idea of people spending more time alone, and being exposed to mortality, and thinking about what their core beliefs and values are, and how they derive meaning and value, is crucial to that. And I think especially with millennial people, younger people, that there is a real kind of shake up about that, and this is a definitive part of that kind of cultural progression. I think. I think that's what I sense in NFTs. When you dig into the community, when you're in there, and engaging with strangers from all around the world, and inevitably young people, and they're just embracing change. They want positivity and goodness, and it's extraordinary. It's like, sorry, I'm proud to be a part of it. It's exciting, and positive, and I mean, there's a lot of, you see this strange kind of negativity around, the sort of the frivolity of, and the misguided stuff of overvaluing things. I don't agree with it, really. I'm for all the reasons that I'm talking about.
Right. But we still have this corner of the metaverse where artists and creators are able to build an ecosystem for themselves, and it's really cool. I wanted to ask you, since we've been talking for a little over an hour now, we had a question from Justin. He said, was there someone in the NFT space that inspired you to create your own, or did you find inspiration elsewhere? And if it was someone who inspired you, who was it? I think maybe they're asking how you got into the NFT space, and also if there was maybe an artist that you saw doing it and you got into it.
Because, I mean, the big one for everyone was Beeple. I mean, that was, I mean, that's an interesting piece of marketing, you know, and just to see that was astounding.
Yeah.
And I'd followed him before NFT. I can't really put my finger on any one in particular. I mean, I was into Bitcoin here in Bali, and you know, I came at it sort of through the maybe a little bit laterally. I don't know. It was more like here's a fascinating concept around verification of ownership, and that's something to explore because it's definitely going to potentially undermine this legacy art world stuff. So I was fascinated by that, and so I was looking at collections. So I was looking at the CryptoPunks and the cypherpunk stuff, and wrapping my head around that. It's interesting also just to see the division of the space through like the one of ones and the sort of the curated, the Makersplaces, and then to see like these collections that grow up, which are they're driven by these mass communities. And there's a really fascinating spectrum of, I was looking at it all, you know, and just being kind of amazed by it. And wondering about the collectors too, like looking at their collections and seeing, like I was saying before, just that there's this spectrum of people that are involved, and it's all just this boiling humanity that's just pouring out of Twitter, which is like quite new to Twitter. I've always sort of avoided it because
same. Crypto is the only reason I'm on there.
Yeah, the intensity and the frequency and the volume is just like
it's mind-boggling.
You know, it's high. It's like full bore humanity just pouring down. So to tap into that, it's intense, and it's inspiring, though, for all the reasons that I'm saying. So I don't know if that's probably a pretty roundabout way of answering the question.
Well, it's been really interesting and exciting to hear about your inspirations and where this latest collection has come from. I think we can all really resonate with with the message behind it. So. And
I hope
so. Absolutely. And so I'm going to share the link again. You can collect your very own piece from the Mood Variants collection. I'm going to drop that in our StreamYard. It's on Makersplace. You can search Rowan E Cassidy if you're watching on the replay. And definitely follow him on Instagram and Twitter. And actually, just before we go, do you have any upcoming drops or projects or events that we should know about aside from this latest drop with Makersplace?
Well, I'm working on a collection. You know, I'm working on a collection of the Mood Variants, and I'll just be updating my social channels, Twitter, so you can always find me and say hi on there, and I'll be updating stuff there.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Whale Fam, for your time and energy, and thank you, Rowan, for your time and energy and sharing your wisdom and experience with us. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Thank you.